Everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. It's a pleasure to be here to introduce this event hosted by engineers and scientists acting locally. Today, we're going to be talking about rural water sanitation with an amazing panel of speakers today. So we're excited that you all can join us. My name is Chris Jackson. I serve as the workshops director for engineers and scientists acting locally. And I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction about our organization before turning it over to our panelists. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. A little bit about who we are as an organization. ESAL is an all-volunteer national 501c3 nonprofit organization that is really dedicated to increasing local and civic engagement by people with STEM backgrounds. And as we're kind of founded by engineers and scientists who have a lot of experience working in public policy, we recognize that there is a significant both an interest among engineers and scientists around the country to engage particularly in local issues around policy, one of which we're going to be talking about today. But there's also a distinct gap where folks maybe don't know how to get engaged, don't know how to take that first step or kind of identify the ways in which they can plug in their expertise and training into the communities around them. And so ESAL was founded to really address that gap and provide those resources and connect folks with opportunities in their community and the tools to be effective advocates and community members. A little bit about the ways that ESAL does that. We run a blog which features people's, like many of the panelists you'll hear from today. We talk about different organizations as well and dive into kind of deep dives in different local issue topics. So I encourage you to check that out. We also host a variety of resources on our website as well, including our local engagement playbook, which provides step-by-step guides for scientists and engineers who are interested in taking that first step into local engagement. We offer kind of a variety of different options, whether that's attending a local council meeting or kind of thinking about running for office. All of these kind of different opportunities, we provide very clear step-by-step guides for you to engage in those activities. And we host events like this. I'm really focused on bringing together different community members and tackling different issues, such as the ones we're doing today. We also host workshops and are at a number of conferences, scientific and otherwise, that we hope, if you're interested in coming to any future events, we hope to see you there as well. So a little bit about the ways that you can stay in touch with ESAL. We are always looking for scientists and engineers who are engaged in their communities. And we'd love to hear how we can help amplify your efforts and kind of work together as partners. So we encourage you to reach out via email or social media. One of the ways in which we can do that is by co-writing a blog post with us. So you can check out the many examples on our blog and see if that's a good fit. We'd be happy to work with you or your organization. We are also an entirely volunteer-run organization, and we have some openings right now. So if this sparks your interest and you'd like to continue to volunteer with ESAL, we have openings on our workshops, web and communications team, and you can check out the postings at that link below. And as I mentioned, one of the other programs that ESAL offers is our kind of local engagement workshops. So in case you or your organization is interested in taking kind of a deep dive into thinking about how you can be more effective advocates or engage in your local community more, we're happy to work with you to build a tailored workshop around your needs and kind of offer that to your group. So these are a couple ways you can get involved with ESAL, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team here. So today's event has been kind of organized and planned by Erin Partlin. And it's my pleasure to now turn it over to her. Let's see. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So Erin is one of ESAL's newest volunteers on our events team. She works for the innovation team at the Water Research Foundation and is a self-professed water technology nerd. She received her PhD from Clemson University, Environmental Engineering and Science, and now focuses on topics of PFAS and water reuse. So Erin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. And I'm not the star of the show today, so I'll be very brief in my remarks, but I'm just so happy to put together my first event with ESAL and to be part of this group. And of course, as water is my day job, I'm very happy to have rural water to be the first focus in this panel. Julie, Jimmy, Jennifer, and Maria Claudia are all absolute experts in this field, and you're very lucky to be able to hear from them. And be sure to ask them questions. You can type directly into the Q&A or into the chat. I'll also be monitoring the chat and dropping in links to help answer any questions as I can. But without further ado, Maria Claudia, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Erin, and thank you for bringing us all together for this so much needed conversation. I am Maria Claudia Reed. I'm a process mechanical engineer with Brown and Caldwell in Portland, Oregon. And I am currently member of the WEF Student and Young Professional Committee. I currently serve as the Student and Young Professionals 2022 Service Project Chair and the second chair of the Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene Subcommittee associated to the Disinfection and Public Health Committee. Thank you everyone again for joining us. And like I said, this is such an exciting conversation. Today, most people living in the United States take for granted that we have reliable systems able to supply clean water and take our waste away. However, the numbers show that still 2 million Americans lack of access to adequate water, sanitation, and systems, exposing all of us to unsafe conditions and bringing other diseases to the picture as well. As many as 25% of homes in the United States, mostly in rural areas, are not connected to centralized water systems. And most of them have their own systems, although underground septic tanks serve well. They can be hindered by issues with geology and installations, leading some households to resort to straight pipe sewers that discharge directly into adjoining lands. Low performance systems primarily affect low-income communities and communities of colors. The lack of basic water access in turn impacts the health and livelihood of these communities, creating a vicious cycle of poverty. Today in this panel, we'll hear from speakers with science, engineer, and policy backgrounds that are currently working with rural communities on solutions to address local water needs. At WEF, and as part of the WASH subcommittee, we want to mainly provide educational opportunities, provide support to other organizations like the American Water Association, the Water Research Foundation, the United Nations, and we try to identify ways in which WEF and the Disinfection and Public Health Committee can assist WASH effort in small rural communities and the developing world through technical assistance and facilitating the sharing of the information, since we have access, fortunately, to so many global experts. I additionally wanted to mention one of the works that came through WEF with help of the United Nations was the Unleash program. The Unleash program is a program that is looking at innovating through the SDGs propelled by the United Nations, innovating on the SDGs to propel actually their development forward. It's an intensive program that walks talent through those innovating processes, and it had typically been an in-person event. However, for COVID mainly, this year event focused on the Alabama Black Belt region, and this hack event focused on clean water and sanitation and public health and the well-being, which covers right there the SDG 6 and 3 in Alabama. This hack featured a diverse group of experts and participants with background including university professors, medical professionals, regulatory agencies, local elected officials, and local activist groups, leaders, among others. solutions ideas came out from this effort, and including ideas to create of a centralized wastewater management entity with various scopes around the Black Belt. Very ambitious. Development of solutions and interactions with the community are currently ongoing with virtual and in-person workshops with the community pending. I had the opportunity to support some of this work that it was done, but it was certainly Anastasia Miskal who led this effort. And with that, thank you for allowing me to share that with you. I wanted to go ahead and introduce our wonderful speakers today. We have Willie Wechter. She is Chief Program Officer with Dig Deep, which is a nonprofit organization working to ensure the water of every American that has running water. I like when I found out that they use this motto, forever. So thank you, Julie, for joining us. We also have Jimmy Jones, which is a founder of Axum Development. He's a consultant engineer that turned advocate for building local capacity systems. And Jennifer Palmioro, who is the Senior Federal Policy Advisor with the National Rural Water Association. Thank you for all of you to join us. And let's start with Julie.
Hi, well, thanks so much. Really appreciate the introduction, and I'm so happy to be here. Really support the mission of ESAL and the purpose of this presentation, this panel discussion. So I also have high esteem for all the other people on this panel, and I'm excited to hear what they have to say. Should I go ahead and share my screen now? Would now be a good time for that? Marie, would now be a good time to share that presentation?
Yep, you can go ahead, Julie.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Okay. So I think everyone should be able to see that now. Make sure I can play this. Here we go. Okay, is everyone seeing the full screen now? Perfect. So Dig Deep is a human rights organization. Well, first let me just introduce, share a little bit about my background. So my name is Julie Wechter, as was mentioned, and I have been at Dig Deep for almost 2 years now. Previously, I worked in international WASH. So I have seen, firsthand, worked in a lot of communities in Eastern Africa and Southeast Asia and in other regions of the world, and seen the need for WASH, the need for water and sanitation. I think that's pretty well established in most of our minds. But when I joined Dig Deep a couple of years ago, that's when I first realized the need in first world, in high income countries, right? That this is not just an issue in low income countries that we might think of, but there's actually a lot of people, as was mentioned, 2.2 million Americans that don't have access to running water. This is not just a public health issue, but this is really a human rights issue and an issue of equity and justice. So it's something that I'm excited to be working on. So yeah, Dig Deep is a human rights organization. We're a nonprofit working to ensure that every American has clean running water forever. As we'll talk about in the future, that doesn't look the same in every community, right? It has to be tailored to different communities that you're working in. And I think that that's one of the key values that we need to remember as we do this work. And I think that everyone probably on this call recognizes the importance of involving the people who are lacking access, to ask them, how they're experiencing this need and getting their insights as we work to solve it. So Dig Deep currently works in we currently work in 2 project sites. Our office is located in Los Angeles, and our primary project is the Navajo Water Project, which is in the Four Corners area of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. And that's on Navajo Nation. And then we also launched in 2020 a project in Appalachia in West Virginia. So those are two of the areas that we identified in a study we did in 2019 together with the US Water Alliance of the kind of hotspots of where, which regions are lacking access, which populations are lacking access to running water in the United States. So the Navajo Water Project is located, as I mentioned, on Navajo Nation. This tribal area is home to 173,000 people, and it has the largest land size of any tribal nation in the US. It's actually the same land size as the state of West Virginia. So a very large area, and people are spread out quite remotely. So you can imagine the challenges that come along with that, with trying to serve the community with water access. More than 30% of the homes across Navajo Nation do not have access to running water. Significant portion of the population. And as I mentioned, a lot of them are remote. And so coming up with, piped water schemes might not be the easiest solution. And we have to get a little bit creative as to how we're going to serve, help those homes have regular running water. The Dene people, that's the Navajo people, are resilient and have survived for generations. And many families have found, ways to get water for their families. So there might be a central well that people go and fetch water from and fill up large cisterns at their home. Some people collect rainwater, some people buy bottled water. But these are some of the strategies, the coping mechanisms that different people have come up with. And then, as I mentioned, the dispersed housing remote location is a challenge for connecting to municipal water lines. So our solution on the Navajo Water Project is to work with individual communities. They're called chapters, is the geographic region or political designation. This project began in 2017, and we're currently working in 3 different communities across Navajo Nation. We have 3 teams, and our traditional system of response or traditional mechanism of getting people safe water is to install home water systems, which are external cisterns buried in the ground, connected to internal piping in the home with hot and cold running water. During COVID, as we all experienced, things had to change, and it was no longer safe to be in, such close contact with homeowners and with families. So the team switched to installing 275-gallon storage tanks outside the home so that at least people were able to have water access. We did find that people living without running water were in greater danger of contracting and spreading COVID because they might be going to a communal water source, right? And forced to interact with other people, or they didn't have the water on hand to wash their hands like the CDC was recommending. So, I would say that the Navajo community specifically, and in general, everyone who's lacking, that 2.2 million Americans that are lacking water access, were more at risk during COVID and had a lot more that they were up against in trying to wash hands and trying to do all the things to keep themselves and their families safe. So this is just kind of a diagram of our home water systems. These are the traditional ones that we've been installing. It comes with a solar panel if the home does not have electricity, which a lot don't, water heater, storage tank, and connected, like I said, inside the home to running water. The other location that I mentioned earlier was Appalachia, or Appalachia Water Project. This is located in McDowell County, West Virginia. It just started, so we just have that one location. It was once the largest coal producing region of the U.S. and was actually at one point, the highest income per capita of any county in the United States. So a lot has changed as coal has, as the US has shifted away from coal, and as jobs have changed, the opportunities there have changed. There we go. Yeah, so as communities have left the area, as coal companies have left the area, the communities have experienced a lot of challenges, including diminishing population, aging infrastructure, and high unemployment. And a lot of the pipelines, the water lines that were laid in West Virginia and elsewhere in Appalachia, actually similar to across the United States, these pipelines might have been laid up to 100 years ago and haven't been frequently updated. And so you can imagine now the situation with pump failures, pipes breaking down. I was on the phone with a manager of one of the water utilities, and she was saying the only thing keeping these ancient pipes together is the fact that they're buried in the dirt. And as soon as you dig the dirt up, the pipe just crumbles. So very, very challenging situation. And people are not only don't have water access, but they're actually backsliding. We're seeing communities losing water access. But again, we do see people that are strong and people that are committed to helping one another and finding a way to, to get their family what they need. So we do see a lot of families in West Virginia, specifically in the project area where we're working, that are collecting water from mountain streams and mountain springs. Like you see this gentleman here has connected a pipe straight into the mountain to channel the water from the stream or from the spring, excuse me, into jugs that he's collecting and he'll take home. But that's, not treated and it's not boiled often. So definitely could introduce some contaminants. So our work there, like I said, began in 2019. All of our work is community led. We hire local staff members. One aspect of our program is installing hydro panels. So I'm not sure how familiar you are. These are kind of an up and coming technology that we wanted to try out and see if they would work, help get access to really remote places. So these collect or create the condensation from the air and turn it into safe drinking water, kind of like a reverse humidifier on a big scale. And then we are also partnering with the Public Service District to install water lines. So as the local water utility goes around and extends water lines, a lot of homes are not able to connect, and we're because they can't afford the connection fees. And so we're able to come alongside them, do some of that work ourselves to reduce the costs so that no one's skipped over because of their income level. So those are our place-based projects. Those are our community-led projects. That's only one aspect of what we do. So I'm going to talk through our impact model to kind of show you, in addition to that work, what else is Dig Deep doing and how does the work that I was just describing kind of play into the larger picture. So our first pillar of our work is to advance community-led solutions by deploying proven WASH strategies to ensure that every American has clean running water forever. These community-led solutions, that primarily is those projects that I was just describing. So we want to be on the ground, helping communities, helping people get access to safe running water, and also to prove that it is possible, right? That even in these hard to reach areas, there are solutions out there. We then take what we've learned from our work on the ground to identify where the data gaps are. So one example is we didn't even know, we knew we were working on Navajo Nation, but we wanted to expand to other communities and we didn't know where the hotspots were, where the areas of least water access in the US were. The data wasn't there. And that's something that we'll probably see a lot of throughout this panel discussion. Is there is just a lot of data that's not there, that makes it really difficult to solve the problem of the water crisis because we just don't know all of the facts about it. So in 2019, we conducted the first national study of water access together with the US Water Alliance. We're able to identify those hotspots, of which Appalachia was one of them, and began our project there. So developing that evidence base and filling in the gaps is the second one of our pillars. The third one is to mobilize America, to share the stories of the people that we're working with other Americans, and to let people know about this crisis. As was mentioned earlier, I think this is something that a lot of Americans don't know about, and maybe we take for granted the fact that we do have water access and aren't aware that 2.2 million Americans don't have that, basic human right. So we want to use the evidence that we're collecting, use the data that we're collecting and the stories from our own personal work to be able to mobilize other Americans so that we can solve this problem in our lifetime. And then our fourth pillar is to build an ecosystem of change. That's why I'm so excited to be on this panel with such incredible experts, because Dig Deep doesn't think we can do this by ourselves. We're not out to, connect every single home that doesn't have water access, but we want to facilitate collaboration that will lead to this diverse and sustainable movement forward, and that together with other experts, together with other nonprofit groups, together with the government agencies and academia, will be able to solve the problem together. So those are the 4 pillars of our work and how those pieces fit together. And yeah, I'm excited to keep chatting with you all and talk more later.
Thank you very much, Julie. We can now move to Jimmy.
Oh, how's everybody doing? Definitely glad to be here and share along on the panel with these subject matter experts. I'm Jimmy Jones, hailing from Shreveport, Louisiana, owner of Axum Development. My background is in project management. I've previously worked on wastewater management programs across the state of Louisiana, particularly in the Shreveport, Louisiana area, focusing on what the government would call a federal consent decree. My past performance includes being a project manager, operations manager, and a project coordinator, where I help manage some of those sustainable outcomes and goals to get us to where we needed to be. Before starting Axum Development Company, what prompted me to start that company was some of the issues I seen with the contracting and the diversity and inclusion within infrastructure. As Julie mentioned earlier, my company, although we focus on municipal consulting, wastewater management practices, inspection, the book and the mission-driven compass behind my company is diversity and inclusion within wastewater management. As Julie mentioned earlier, a lot of these pipelines across the southern region of the United States are dilapidated. So most of these pipelines have not been replaced within 100 years. So what you're seeing now is a collective autonomy of cities and municipalities going through consent decrees. Consent decrees are when the federal government comes in and says, hey, you're having or experiencing too many SSOs, i.e. sanitary sewer overflows, basically when sewer submerges from the manholes and wastewater system, spilling onto the street, causing issues such as health issues and problems with wastewater. So the diversity and inclusion piece in wastewater management includes when you're going to a city in which these areas are facing these problems, the number one goal we try to focus on is identifying the key stakeholders. Identifying the key stakeholders, meaning whether it may be the mayor, elected officials, letting these guys know and officials know, hey, you have a problem. They know they have a problem, but letting them know you have a problem and here's the way we're going to fix it. The inclusion and diversity piece comes in where there isn't a surefire plan to be inclusive of the community that you're addressing. What I mean by that is most of these issues in consent decree areas are taking place in minority towns, minority cities. So we focus on making sure that we have programming when we go to these elected officials. We make sure we have partnerships to help develop the constituents in that area. So the second thing I want to talk about is constituent development. So we talked about educating the key stakeholders, which are the elected officials and people elected by the community. The second part of that is making sure you have curriculums, whether they are curriculums or training programs specifically for the people in those towns. There's no reason contract work or wastewater management projects, if you have $50 to $100 million to spend, I strongly believe that the people in those towns should be of benefit to those funds and allocations. I strongly believe that there should be some due diligence in those elected officials or municipalities placing some type of initiative saying, hey, if you're going to come into our town or our city, these are the things that we would like to see. We know we have an issue. We know you are the subject matter experts, but hey, we want to include our town to have sustainable initiatives and sustainable goals. So when you guys leave, whoever the contractors may be, our town has some sustainable outcomes for our community to live on. Number 3 is building curriculums in the educational systems. Most of these consent decrees and wastewater projects that happen within these southern communities lack educational programs for the youth. You have engineering firms, you have project management firms coming in from all across the world addressing these pipes, but nobody is addressing the people. The people are the most important part when you talk about wastewater management, because that's what the pipeline affects. As engineers, as scientists, as researchers, as scholars, sometimes we often forget the whole premise of the project. And the premise of the project is the people. By aligning the project with the people, you have sustainable goals and outcomes. You build relationships across these areas. Currently, I'm working on a couple of projects, but one project in particular entitled Cultivate Caddo. What we did was we got with the municipality entity proposing a plan with the issues they had. The first thing I did was I went straight to the community. Once contract documents were signed, once MOUs and NDAs were signed, we didn't address the pipes. The first thing we did, we went and talked directly to the community. We want to hear the community's voice. What things do you want to see? What are your issues? What are your problems? Because most times these issues from consent decrees have been happening for the last 50 to 60 years. So when you come in with these different contractors, when you come in with these different firms, they're unfamiliar with people from their area. They're unfamiliar with these type of projects because, again, these are projects that have never happened. These pipes haven't been replaced in 100 years. So we go in, we ask them what are the main issues, what are the main problems associated around wastewater. One example may be, hey, there's sewer spilling out in front of my driveway. It's been doing this since 1975. We've had instances where we go out and we see those issues on multiple occasions. In front of Miss Jackson's house, there's sewer spilling into my yard. I've just given up. I mean, I really don't know what to do. So we go and take that information, put it in a common database for our needs. The second thing we do, we say, hey, in this community, who has baseline, who has just basic labor skills to be able to benefit from the projects we're doing. So say for instance, wastewater management also includes contracting and replacing sidewalks, replacing driveways, planting trees, putting up fences. All these things can be done within a community. All these things can be done within a certain project. You don't have to bring in outside contractors to do this work. So our job, we bring in subject matter experts to train these individuals in these communities to do what they need to do to be beneficiaries of these funds. As you all know, President Biden in the United States of America are signing off on the $44 billion infrastructure bill. The infrastructure bill specifically speaks to diversity and inclusion. The infrastructure bill speaks directly to HBCU funding and increasing the amount of STEM initiatives to go into these universities. And these go back into the communities in which they affect. Another thing we do, once we align the issues with the community, we put them through a training program, and we do that by partnering with other entities that may be across the state, that may be across the world. Hey, if your mission and your initiative is training communities to be better, training communities for longer sustainable outcomes and goals, would you partner with us going into this community, teaching Mr. Trevor on how to do concrete work? So what happens is any contractor that comes in to do wastewater management, Mr. Trevor doesn't have to be an engineer. Mr. Trevor doesn't have to be a subject matter expert. If all Mr. Trevor does is concrete, that means he's going to partner with the contractor on all sewer projects, on all wastewater management projects in that city. And again, most of these projects are happening in minority areas. 99.9% of the work is being done. It's not being done by 99% of the work that's being done in the communities. We have to understand that involving the community and starting with the people is the most important thing. Another aspect we're initializing, and we just completed this, is making sure that that community has access to funds. Access to funds is major. How do we do that? We equip that community with a 501c3. We teach that community about the impact of having a 501c3. We teach that community about the bylaws of that 501c3. We teach that community about the mission statement of that 501c3. So when that 501c3 is developed, they know exactly what to ask. They now know how to go out and get the grants. They now know how to go out and get the funding they need to benefit their communities. So just building that whole nonprofit status within those communities allows those communities to become their own smaller I'm gonna call them sub-cities, working in conjunction with the city, working in conjunction with the municipality. It's about building independence and not being too dependent on one pot of money, one pot of allocation. So that's another major aspect we specialize in. One thing we've done in the past 2 months is the prison to pipeline is a huge issue. It's a huge issue. When contractors come in, they only want to come in and lay sewer pipe and they want to leave. So, well, one thing you can put on the contractors, especially if you have your own 501c3, you can say, hey, you're coming into our community doing work. We've met with the schools. So our team has met with every school in that neighborhood to say, hey, we have some initiatives and some programming going on that these contractors are coming in to do. Would you like to partner with these schools? Would you like to partner with these contractors? There may be some small projects at the base level where kids can understand flood mitigation, BMPs, best management practice, fencing, drone technology. Before projects start, just for an example, when projects start, you have to do what you call pre and post inspection. All that is a drone taking pictures and photos of how a project looks before, during, and after. Everybody knows that kids or children are into, the games, and they are very efficient as such. So putting that in their head, saying, hey, I can partner up with a contractor to learn how to fly a drone to save my community, to protect my community, as well as protect the contractor and protect the municipality because it falls under risk management. That's one example of a partnership with the schools. The fourth thing I want to speak on is strengthening your partnerships. If you know you have a solid program that's going to affect the community in mass, it's best to shop that proposal across similar cities or similar communities with similar issues to see if they want to onboard, because what you have is what you call impact investors. So that's the gist of what we do.
Very much, Jimmy. That was very rich and full of great initiatives. I can wait for a Q&A portion of it. Jennifer, would you join us? Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Let's see. Sharing. Okay. Sharing the slideshow. Okay. I'm trying to get the first slide to come up. It's not to be working.
It's not moving.
maybe Erin can help me. It says I'm sharing, but,
We can see them.
oh, you can see it?
We can see
Yeah.
that.
Oh, okay, beautiful. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really energized by what Jimmy said, and also Julie. I think you're going to hear some similar themes between the three of us. And I love that we can do these Zooms, but it also makes me sad that I can't see the audience and sort of do more interactive things. But so let me see, did it switch to a new slide here or not? Are you
Not
seeing me?
yet.
Okay. I might need some help. I'm not, I apologize. It's not advancing.
Okay. It might be if you have two screens, it might be on the wrong screen.
Yeah, I do have two screens.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can share them for you instead.
Okay, that would be great, because then this will be a little bit more smooth. I'll stop sharing if I can get up there, or someone can just stop sharing for me. Ah, there we go. Boop. Okay. And then I'll wait for you to pull it up. And I can just begin, I think, by
I'm looking for my own share screen. Oh, never mind.
thank you, Erin. We can go right to that second slide. Okay, so just a little sort of mission here. Clean drinking water and safe wastewater treatment are vital to the health and safety of Americans. And with the support of our state association, National Rural Water Association strives to support grassroots efforts that help rural communities thrive. So if you could advance to the next slide. So what I'm going to be talking about is giving a little bit of an introduction to National Rural Water Association. Introduce you, if you're not familiar with it, to the circuit rider concept, and then how it informs the work that we do today. Next slide. So National Rural Water Association is a nonprofit organization, and we're dedicated to training, supporting, and promoting water and wastewater professionals that serve small and rural communities across the country. We have a portfolio of federally funded programs to support small and rural water and wastewater systems. And these programs are an essential part of helping to bridge the gap between regulatory requirements and the needs of rural utilities. Next slide. So I'm really excited because we are celebrating our 45th anniversary, which is really pretty incredible. And prior to working for National Rural Water as their senior federal policy advisor, I was actually a source water specialist and then executive director for the New Hampshire Rural Water Association. And so it's only recently that I've learned about National's history, and that originally it was created by really from community. It was formed by rural Americans who worked to create water systems for their communities and their families. And then in the 1960s, Farmers Home Administration, which is now USDA Water and Waste Disposal Program, began funding rural water systems, and the rural water movement began. It was operators and boards of directors that bonded over informal training and technical assistance sessions that created the rural water model. And then officially in 1976, National Rural Water Association formed. Next slide. So from originally there were 8 associations, and I'm not going to be able to remember them all by memory, but Texas, North Dakota, South Dakota, I believe North Carolina, Indiana, and Kansas, I might have hit them all, were the original 8, and it's grown to 49 states, covering now the 50 states across the US, and also covering tribal utilities and some of the US territories. And as National Rural Water has grown, so has what we do evolved, and the face of rural water has also evolved. Next slide, please. So again, we provide training and technical assistance to water and wastewater system personnel, and we tend to focus on small and rural communities that serve less than 10,000 people. The state rural water associations have full-time staff and offices located throughout the country to serve all 50 states and tribally owned systems in the US territories, like I just mentioned. Next slide. Today, we have 8 national programs that were inspired by the original Circuit Rider program. So I'll just highlight a couple of them here. We have an apprenticeship program that's growing. It's currently in 34 states, and it's trying to educate and encourage people to enter the water and wastewater field, because much of the workforce is retiring. And what else can I tell you here? Let's continue. Next slide. Okay, so the Circuit Rider concept. In the 60s, it was a new and welcomed concept. It was funded through membership dues and state funds. And the Circuit Riders were former water system operators and managers. They were there and available to lend a helping hand to water systems. Next slide. They were not accountants or attorneys. They were not regulatory in nature. They did not work for the Farmers Home Administration or the EPA or the State Health Department. Next slide. So this is why they were able to get in the door, because they were former operators and water system managers, and there was a level of trust and welcoming by systems on the ground. Next slide. So I like this little quote by a local professor here in New Hampshire. The expert-driven top-down model for improving the quality of local communities has not only failed to deliver, but sometimes caused more harm. Next slide. So again, going back to the Circuit Rider model, these folks are not regulatory in nature. They have to establish a level of trust. Often this takes many visits and time, and they connect with operators by being reliable and providing useful information, and they connect on site where water and wastewater operators need it, which is on site at their system. And we can kind of call it the Cheers effect from that TV show that many might remember, but just that friendly face walking in the door and providing emotional and technical support. Next slide. So that's exactly what Circuit Riders, they act as a resource. They are a support system, both technically and emotionally. And then they trust the path that the operator or the community decides to take. So they provide the information, but they're not going to say, this is how you should develop this project. Next slide. National Rural Water does work with tribally owned systems and typically provides assistance in the area of training and technical capacity development. And for example, in the last year, National provided more than 300 hours of training and technical assistance to tribal utility personnel in 14 states. Next slide. The Source Water program, which started in 2000, really got its success because the Circuit Rider program sort of opened the door for source water specialists to work with communities. In order for a source water plan and program to be successful, there's a number of steps that need to occur. And one of them most certainly is having an invitation from the community. If the community is not interested in a project, then it's not going to happen. And typically how this is organized is a kickoff meeting is started in a project area with a few stakeholders who might be interested. So for example, a water superintendent, and then another key stakeholder who organizes the kickoff meeting, where someone from the state might talk about these are some of the potential sources of contamination in your watershed or in your source protection area. And then the water superintendent talks about the status of the water supply. National Rural Water personnel typically talk about how we can be helpful in a source water protection program in a process. And I really like what Jimmy said earlier about inviting the key stakeholders and having sort of a curriculum. We found that this works really well with monthly meetings, sort of taking a steering committee through a curriculum, and so that they are understanding their system and also potential sources of contamination, and learning about ways that they can address those issues. Ultimately, the committee comes up with recommendations. During the process of meeting, they may decide that they need an outside expert to come and talk to them about a particular issue, like how might logging affect their water supply, and the source water specialist can arrange for experts like that to come in and provide some insight. The source water specialist writes up the information of plan, and then the committee, most importantly, shepherds the plan, and hopefully the community adopts it. Okay, next slide. And I'm going to skip that for now. I see it's not that much time left. In Louisiana, I just want to say that Louisiana Rural Water Association, the training specialists, performed risk and resiliency assessments during Hurricane Ida. So this is some of the work that we do. Next slide. And I'll take any questions when it's appropriate. And I have my contact information at the last slide as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I think we got some questions in our chat. I have some questions already for you, for all of you. I'm gonna go ahead and start with you, Jennifer, since you kind of close our conversation and it's fresh. You talked about, you know, a lot about pretty much promoting the policy, but water quality varies greatly location to location. How can water treatment be made more not necessarily accessible, but may available equitably?
Yes, that's a great question, Maria. Thank you so much. I think it's really hard. You kind of have to meet a community where they are and make sure that you have all of the voices at the table, the correct stakeholders, like Jimmy said previously. That's really very important. You also need to include dissenters, people that might be very difficult. They need to be at the table because in the end, they might be your biggest asset. You know, I think doing this type of work is complex. It's messy. There are twists and turns. You need to hold on like it's a roller coaster. You know, the idea of funding, like Jimmy said before, is really important, because if there is no funding, you really can't get anything done. So let's hope that the time is now, from what we're hearing in the news, that some good things are coming our way.
Thank you. I did notice Jimmy had a couple of questions from our audience. Let me look at those. Someone actually asked Jimmy, what are some ways that you would like to see scientists and engineers involved in United States rural water needs, especially people who are not local to this issue?
Okay, that's a great question and a common question. Ways I would like to see, you know, engineers and scientists involved is basically reaching out to these areas in which, you know, the problems exist. A lot of these areas, specifically rural areas, they're unfamiliar on how to reach out to different entities outside of the state. And sometimes they may have broadband issues. A lot of internet is very, very, very slow in rural areas due to low-hanging trees, just existing and aging infrastructure. So that's one way. Another way is reaching out to the HBCUs and not just HBCUs, just colleges and universities in these areas, because usually they have people from those areas that attend those schools. The reason I mentioned HBCUs because most of these areas and these problem areas are in minority communities, Black and brown communities, not just Black areas, but you know, you have a whole set of Latinos. So you want to make sure you hit everyone. So those are some ways, you know.
You did mention your presentation, you focus, I remember you saying the people that we're serving to are the most important. However, you know, we know that engineers are the main promoters of the water technology and implementers. How do we like bridge that gap? Like, how do we make sure that our knowledge or expertise is used to promote the longevity of the rural infrastructure?
I'm going to say culture interpretation. Most of the times people don't understand cultures in different areas because they don't understand the people there. So before you go in to address the issues of environmental woes, understanding the people first. So building relationships with those towns, you know, just common listening sessions, not talking about anything with sewer or water. Just, you know, here's some things about our community. Here's some things from our community. You may have an engineering firm coming out of California that has to do some work in Faraday, Louisiana. These people don't know each other. They're coming from the West Coast, and you have another set of people that's in Southern Louisiana. So not only do you have a diversity disconnect with regional aspects, but you have cultural aspects. So understanding the people in which the problems exist.
If I can just add in on Jimmy's point, one of the things that we found in the research that we did in 2019 is that race is the leading indicator of whether or not a household in America has access to running water. So Jimmy's 100% accurate, you know, and I'm sure we've all seen that anecdotally, but the data shows that as well, that Black and brown households are twice as likely as white households to lack access to running water, and Native American households are 19 times more likely than white households to lack that same access. So it's a massive problem, and I think that's why it's not just an issue of, you know, reaching the last however many percent or 2 million Americans, but it truly is an equity issue and a justice issue. It's something that we can't ignore. Jimmy, thanks for sharing about that.
No problem. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. You know, during your conversation and echoing what you're saying, you did mention, I noticed you mentioned some wash directly policies, I would say, that you implement in your projects. Two things there for you that made me curious. One is, how can local water boards ensure that the success of our community finance water projects? Like, I noticed, you know, you talked about three big projects, and it, you know, that took me there. And also from that, what have you been, you know, and this is more coming from a WASH subcommittee member, what type of WASH programs would you hope to see in the US, and any lessons learned so far that you can share for us, you know, considering that in mind?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think, you know, Jimmy actually was kind of addressing some of those issues or things we need to focus on for the local water boards when he was talking. I think, to me, one of the primary issues is just involvement in local water boards. And you know, a lot of water boards run elections that are uncontested, and a lot of them are not representative of the communities that they're serving, the populations that they're serving. And so I think getting more community members that, you know, are part of that group of people that don't have water access or who are threatened to lose it, to be on the board and to be in seats of power and have those voices at the table is really important. And, you know, there is a decent amount of funding out there. There's a decent amount of technical experts and policies that are in place to try to help water boards and communities and municipal utilities, but they're really hard to find. It's, you know, you have to have a lot of time, you have to have a lot of money. I think a lot of communities that are getting access to these funding are able to pay for a grant writer, for example, to access these. And that's just simply not an option for some of the smaller or more rural areas that really need it the most. So I think that you know, helping those smaller communities, helping those smaller areas that traditionally may not have had access or know about these avenues for support, making sure that they are aware of those, I think is really important. And then as for the international thing, I think that's the same. I think just everywhere we're seeing, whether it's in the US or in a different country, that we need to make sure that the communities that are most impacted by the policies are the ones that are helping make the decisions, and that it's not the people who already have the power and probably already have running water. We need to bring everyone into this decision-making process.
Thank you, Julie. We do not have, we went over, I actually had one more question for Jimmy from our panelists.
Okay.
They say they're curious to learn about how you fund the community-based work you do, and how is this part of your business model?
Okay. Well, that's a great question, because that's the funding piece. So the funding piece is usually funded by through private-public partnerships. Sometimes when you go into municipalities, they may not have funds set aside for these type of projects. So what you do is either you equip the municipality with grant funding education, or you equip the community with grant funding education on top of who we go out to partner with. There may be a national entity, a regional entity, a state entity, or a local entity.
I think, thank you for sharing that. That's key, educating the community on on what's out there available for us, or what can we, what we able to pursue or not. Another question from our panelists to you, Jimmy. Well, they thank you, and I'll read the message because it's very kind and inspiring. They thank you for being such an inspiration around this topic. Then they continue to ask, what does the timeline usually look like for training community members? Do you all delay the start of construction to allow for training, or does the training happen on the job with construction happening at a close to normal rate?
Okay, so we have a 4-phase. I didn't include this into the slide, but the timeline is based on the community and the needs of the community. First, we go in with a project called AIM. A stands for assessment. Assessment may take from 3 to 6 months. We go in assessing all the issues, sub-utility, whether it's a pipeline, whether it's a sub-utility or a topical utility. The second part of that would be implementation. The third part of that is maintenance. And the fourth part of AIM is municipal sustainability. So each phase happens between 3 to 6 months. Since our projects overlap each other within those time frames, due to us working in multiple communities, we are usually going back and forth. But generally, we try to complete our assessment phase in 90 days, going into our next community, and it overlaps. So we have a standing blueprint to go into the next community.
Thank you. I wanted to close maybe with one last question, Jennifer or Julie, if you wanna go ahead and address it, but any advice or, important, yes, that you like to share with us as part of, as engineers, what are the ways that you think you like to see scientists and engineers involved directly with this rural issues? Often we are kind of excluded from it. Most of us live in not rural areas, and it's mainly like, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And how do we promote that within our own industry?
Okay, I'll take a stab at this. I guess I'll share an anecdote. I live in a little town in New Hampshire that's like 3,500 people. And one of my source water projects was actually with my very own town. And even though I was from this town, people were very skeptical about working with me. They thought I was a regulator. So I think, again, to harken back to something Jimmy said, you have to develop that trust, and that trust takes time, and it is not on a normal trajectory that maybe many of us who are scientifically oriented think about. So a lot of patience and sort of putting in time to get to know people and where that community is, and gaining that trust, and then also giving up some control and maybe learning from that community. And that's one reason I've really enjoyed this as a career, is that you continue to learn, and there is not one size fits all, because every community has its own personality.
I agree with that last statement you said. And some of our experiences and watch also, took us there as well. So thank you for sharing that. Unless any of our amazing speakers want to add something else, I'll go ahead and close our session. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. This was very enriching. Thank you for your time and sharing your expertise and experience with us. I'd like to, before we go, refer you to ESSAL and Erin, representing ESSAL, were the ones who put this panel together. again, they dedicate increasing local engagement from us, the people with background in science, technology, engineers, and mathematics. So check them out. And also, I would like to invite everyone to follow the Washoe Committee West and the work that is coming ahead. And the United Nations Unleash hack that will be happening next year, but also what it was done this year at the Alamaba Black Belt and the work that is happening currently. You will also get a survey, I think, at the end of the Zoom call. If you have some time, be nice if you address it. But thank you everyone again for joining us, and to each of you, Jennifer, Julie, and Jimmy. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria Claudia. When we close out, there will be a survey, so please take that one so we know how much you enjoyed this panel, and this will be available on YouTube following the event.
Thank you.